Sobukwe Azania,
Comrade Nkrumah will introduce the panelists, please.
Is Zwane too sons and daughters of?
Yes, I can.
Is Zwane too sons and daughters of Africa? My name is Nkrumah Kgagudi. Thanks for joining today's sessions, which will reflect on the soul of Sobukwe and spirituality. A panel of discussion, the event hosted by PAC of Azania, Gauteng province. The panelists we're going to have the Gauteng provincial chairperson, Tsietsi Molebatsi, who would be the icebreaker on the topic, the soul of Sobukwe and spirituality. Having done that, then we're going to then open to the panelists. And our panelists, we have Africa Michael Muendane, the party stalwart and a founding member of the PAC, and who has interacted severally on various forms with the founding leader of the PAC, Robert Sobukwe. We are also joined as part of the panel, the two Dumisanis, Africa Dumisani Zwane, the former Secretary for Education of the PAC, and we are also joined by Africa Dumisani Methula from PAC Johannesburg region. The three panelists would ponder, indulge us, unbundle the issue. In the process, we'll have questions also, and also as moderators, myself with Africa Tsietsi Molebatsi would further there and there interject and to moderate the discussion and also throw several questions for the panelists. I'm then going to hand over Mafrika to Mafrika Tsietsi Molebatsi. Before I do that, given the nature of the topic, I felt that maybe it might be imperative that one shares a code, not also per se, but I hope that the panelists will also deal with this particular aspect. There's a code that says that about leaders are servants first. It says, I quote, but among you, it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. If you know your literature, if you know your documents, you'll be able to know where to locate this particular part of the code. There's also another part which speaks about fairness is a leader's moral obligation. It says that if a king judges the poor with truth, his throne will be established forever. Close quote. Mafrika Molebatsi Israel too. I hand over to you, son of the soil. We lost Mafrika Molebatsi, so he's still on board.
I see only the three of us here. And we left with only two people.
Oh, Mafrika Nkrumah, you're back. We have lost Mafrika Molebatsi.
Can't you play that song while we're trying to locate him?
Asifela
Machoni, I'm back. The contact was lost, but it's restored now. I'm very sorry.
Okay, Mafrika Molebatsi, you can carry on.
I'm back in Machoni. Thank you very much. Contact was lost.
I suppose you can kick off with your part, the introduction.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm very sorry, revolutionary, for my cut in transmission. Mafrika, for some time, I've been mulling over the issue of Sobukwe's soul and his spirituality. At a stage when I read How Can Men Die Better, I then learned that he was in and out of church. He read the Bible about 4 times, and every time he read the Bible, he would go back to church. And at a certain stage, after his reading of Marxist-Leninist thinking, would go out of church. And as soon as I get imbued into the basic documents in the mid-70s, I then started developing an understanding when he said there are 2 institutions that are not well represented in occupied Azania. The one is Christianity and the other is communism. And I then started understanding that he was a Christian, and the very fact that he was a lay preacher in the Methodist Church. And somewhere in one of his speeches, he quotes a Methodist hymnal, you know. Now, that has always, with me, also coming from a Christian and a spiritual background with regard to consciousness and faith. I've always been thinking that there is something about Sobukwe that we are not saying. There is something about this man that we are not delving deeper into. There is something that makes him to be this very compound and complex being that is able to articulate Pan-Africanism in a manner sui generis, or of its own kind. And recently, I then contacted the Methodist Church, and things being as we intend them on the 14th of March, will be at the Methodist Church in Jabavu, where he was a lay preacher from 57 to 59. And I then thought of people who could look deeper into this topic. Hence, I then got Comrade Ngila, who could look at it from the level of the soul and from a psychological perspective. And then I know that the Reverend Methula is in it, and Mafrika Zwane Mangete is a very deep and well-understanding Christian, so, and also an ideologue of note. So I thought that we could get the 3 of you just to give us an idea of your own understanding of the soul of Sobukwe and his level of spirituality, because it's very clear the PAC speaks of the spiritual and the material interests of the African people. We are the only revolutionary movement that I have come across that puts spirituality together with materiality. So if everything allows it, I'll then hand over to Mafrika Mashilo Kgagudi as the Secretary of the Province, just to kickstart the process and just for him to be discretionary instead of in terms of starting with any one of the comrades. Thank you very much. Izwe lethu.
Yeah, Africa. Thanks, Mafrika Molebatsi for the words. We are not now going to dwell on the issue of Africa. We strive for the material and the spiritual, technological and educational advancement of the African people. Mafrika Dumisani Zwane, I would have loved to start with Mafrika welcome Methula, but I would come to him at a later stage. Mafrika Dumisani Zwane, can you quickly probably share with us your interpretation or perspective. Sobukwe and spirituality. We strive for the material, spiritual, education, and cultural advancement of the African personality, to project the African personality. Your view, Johnny?
Thanks, Mafrika Kgagudi, and thanks for honoring me with the opportunity to be the groundbreaker or to initiate the discussion. I think the better way to understand Sobukwe's spirituality will require that we have an understanding of the African people's spirituality, their nature and as spiritual people. And it is Lembede who is helping us with this understanding. In his article written on the 29th July 1944 to the newspaper at that time, Mthethileli Wabantu, on the topic African National Congress and churches, Lembede says, Africans are deeply religious people. He goes on, says, our religious feeling is to be treasured as of supreme value in our national struggle, because like the Israelites of old, we shall achieve national consolidation and progress only when we become conscious of our divine mission and destiny. In the same article, he concludes it by saying, our religious feeling is a treasure of our souls. We have received it from our ancestors, and we are constrained and in duty bound to pass it on untarnished to the coming generations. Now, this is how Lembede describes the spirituality of Africans. He takes this further in articles that I will refer to later, where he was examining the concept of God by many writers, and where he was talking about African nationalism in the church. And this is where I believe Sobukwe may have drawn his inspiration in the understanding of spirituality and religion per se. Then Sobukwe himself demonstrates his spirituality in his first speech, which he delivered at Fort Hare, his maiden speech, which he delivered on the 21st of October 1949. He demonstrates his connectivity or connection with God in this speech, where he says, a word to those who are remaining behind. You have seen by now what education means to us, the identification of ourselves with the masses. Education means to us service to Africa. In whatever branch of learning you are there for Africa. You have a mission. We all have a mission. A nation to build, we have a God to glorify. I want you to underline the part where he says, a God to glorify. This introduces Sobukwe's relationship with God and how much she understood his being to be deriving from God. As we proceed, we will share his many letters which he wrote to his wife while in prison, and which he wrote to many people and even to Benjamin, and also demonstrate the various points in his life where he began to question some of the Christian doctrines. I want in my introduction, Comrade Nkrumah, to also say in the very speech which he delivered, he also again demonstrates his understanding of different types of Christians. He mentions the roles that were played by missionaries. In this very speech, he says, every time our people have shown signs of uniting against oppression, their friends have come along and broken that unity. In the very earliest days, it was the missionary. we owe bitter feelings between the Fingos and the Xhosas to the Christian ideals of Reverend Shaw. Here, Sobukwe shows that he understood that people who may be coming to you carrying the Bible or professing Christianity or professing the word of God may not at all times be genuine and sincere in their approaches. He, however, emphasizes his connection with God in the concluding parts of this speech, where he says, and we have it from the Bible that those who crucified Christ will appear before him on the judgment day. We are what we are because the God of Africa made us so. So this underscores or emphasizes the depth of Sobukwe's connection with God, his belief in God, and his understanding of God, and to a great extent, his spirituality. He was deeply spiritual, and this was observed by quite so many people. And I believe you will recall a comment that was made by Foster that Sobukwe has a divine sense of purpose or mission. So the word divine defines his spiritual connectivity. So even the settlers observed his depth spiritual. That's why they could not break him. Allow me to pause, and as I indicated, I will refer to the various points in his life where there were moments of doubt and question. And I will also link it to how Lembede explains those moments and the influences of those moments. Israel.
Africa. Thanks for expanding the part of Sobukwe, and we hope that as we continue, we'll further unbundle some of the aspects and thought-provoking aspects that you have illuminated. Bramike, I'm coming to you. But before I come to you, I'm also pushed by some of the points raised by Mafrika at Dumisani. There's, when you read the basic documents of the PAC, on the introduction, there's a point where it says that it is very difficult to introduce Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe to readers. No one has done that adequately yet. We call him the man who refused to give up. The fact of the matter is that Mangaliso had a specific mission in life. It is not difficult to understand that mission. What is extremely difficult is to define it. Coming to you, Bramike, can you give us your perspective on Sobukwe and spirituality? The basic documents of the party, there's as I've said, the part that says that what is extremely difficult is to define him. What kept Sobukwe fired up? What kept Sobukwe him to refuse to give up? Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Comrade Nkrumah. And it's nice to see you again, to see your face again after such a very, very long time. And you know, whenever we meet, we get involved in discussions and engagement and stuff like that. And thank you for this opportunity, Comrade Molebatsi, for creating this opportunity and setting up this platform to better understand or understand even more the one leader in Africa who was completely different from others. A leader who had an orientation that is different. A leader who had a very, very high level of consciousness and also recognized that he had to have this consciousness because, you know, I don't know how many people understand that the ultimate reality, there are many realities in our lives. The ultimate reality is consciousness. And consciousness means that you are conscious of yourself, who you are, what you are, and also what your purpose is. Why were you given this precious thing called life? Why were you brought onto the planet to live here? You are not just dropped off onto the planet without a purpose. So Sobukwe was conscious of his purpose. That is primary. And being conscious of his purpose, he was also aware that he must recognize that there are principles that govern life. And that recognition of understanding and accepting and embracing and aligning oneself with the principles that govern life, you are actually aligning yourself with life and becoming balanced. And you'll be able to relate to everything that happens in life, all the other realities that I've alluded to. So we are talking about orientation here. He was oriented in that way. Now, there are 4 dimensions within which we can become orientated. Other people are materially orientated, which means that they place value on material things. And they worship material things, and they think that that is the ultimate reality, materialism of the physical things that we see. Other people are oriented mentally, that is intellectually. These are the kinds of people who put a great store by mental attributes. That mental attributes are the ultimate reality of force. And then there are those who are emotionally oriented. And then you have those who are spiritually orientated. Now, Sobukwe was spiritually orientated because spirituality means that we are spiritual, but we have a physical existence or a physical experience. Sobukwe understood that. Because you see, I have my body. My body cannot operate on its own. It is guided by the mind. That's where intellectualism comes in. And then the intellectual attribute or the intellectual dimension cannot operate on its own. It has got to be governed by spirituality, because spirituality is the force, is the energy which drives the mind. The mind cannot operate on its own. It must be, not must, but it is always fired by the spirit. Sobukwe knew that, he understood that. So the ultimate, therefore, of the 4, not that the other 3 are not important, but the ultimate is spirituality, because it forms the basis of one's life. And that was Sobukwe's orientation. That is why he could fit into any situation whatsoever, because in everything there is energy, and that is equated with spirituality. In both Limbede's interpretation of life, as well as Sobukwe's interpretation of life. So Sobukwe therefore recognized that there are principles that if you align yourself with those principles, then you are in good heart with life. But if you violate those principles, then you find that you are at odds with life. I will just mention some of them. I won't go into too much detail, but I have got to discuss what they mean, because Sobukwe was represented by those principles. And when these principles are imbued in a person, we call them attributes. These are his attributes. He has no other attributes which were primary except these. And the first was love. Love to Sobukwe meant that he saw other human beings as being himself. He would say, I am you, you are me, you and me together with God are one thing. Now that's the greatest principle, because you can now communicate with individuals around you, groups around you, and also with God, and see these aligned together with you. And in that way, you are secured and stable in life. That is the kind of orientation that Sobukwe had. That is why he spoke about love. He said, love Africa with all your heart, with your body, with your mind and everything. And he said this in his speech in 1949 in Fort Hare. So love was at the center. Now we talk about God. When Sobukwe embraced love and recognized love as the greatest principle of life, he actually recognized God. Because go to any church, you will find that they say God is love. That is the identity of God. He's not just the name God, he's also love. So love and God are one thing. In the same way that you and me together with God are one thing.
Sure.
That is a fulcrum around which Sobukwe's thinking rotated. And then Sobukwe had integrity. And that is a principle of life. You violate integrity, you are at odds with life. Nobody will trust you. Nobody will rely upon you. And you cannot have fairness towards people. And then integrity simply meant that what you think and what you say and what you do are integrated into one thing. And Sobukwe was like that. He never said one thing and did another. So integrity.
Yes.
Integrity was at the center of his way of operation. Sorry, you wanted to say something?
No, yeah, I was saying, Bramike, that whilst you are there on integrity, masibambe lapho, so that you will expand later on the issue of integrity. And the reason for that is that in one of, I hope Africa Dumisani, you are Zwane, and Africa Methula, when he has joined the session, he'll also come on board. The point raised by Bramike of integrity. In one of the writings about Sobukwe, it says that at every stage in his life, he persistently, fearlessly, and outspokenly refused to be co-opted into the corrupt system of his day and in any capacity, or to connive in any public or private reaction with those in authority, both in the government and in the liberation movement. He was not afraid to stand alone on the principle. The point that Bramike, you pointed out, the centrality and the significance of aligning oneself to a principle. This part says that Sobukwe was not afraid to stand alone on principle. Mafika Tumsan, if you are still there, to expand further on this particular issue, Bramike addressed the issue of integrity, aligning oneself to principles. And at some point, we'll try to problematize this particular issue of, is there a point of convergence of spirituality in relation to the aspect of material or materialism Is there a contradiction? Is there a convergence? Or does one inform the other? And how did Sobukwe create a balance of addressing issues which by their very nature are material issues, where now in terms of when you lose or refer to PAC documents, it speaks about our policies will flow, or the logic of our policies will flow from the concrete material conditions of the African people to their long-term fundamental interest. Now, how do you feature the aspect of spirituality, Sobukwe spirituality, in relation to that particular principle or point of departure of PAC? Africa Dumisani.
Yeah, thanks, African Nkrumah, and I also would like to thank the contribution made by Africa Ngila Muendane in illuminating the different dimensions of a human being and emphasizing the spirituality part, which of course defined the philosophy and the thoughts of Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, and which brought us to this discussion today. And I also want to appreciate the emphasis on the principle of love and the value of love and the principle of integrity, as he mentions it. Before I answer your question, African Nkrumah, I also want to, or I actually want to maybe go a little deeper on the love one first, the value of love, which Sobukwe's spirituality built in him.
Africa Dumisani, can I interrupt for a second there before you get into it? If possible, can Africa Muendane put up his camera in a more straight forward position, because we just see the roof. If you could.
Oh, is it okay like this?
Now we see the full Africa Muendane. Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, because I can't see the aspecting of the camera.
Okay, yeah, I was saying the Christian faith which Sobukwe embraced from his youth. It's what grounded him on the notion of love, which he talks about many a times. He speaks about us loving Africa, having to love Africa, and he speaks against the doctrine of hatred, which he says is self-consuming, and that can only come from someone who is deeply spiritual, who understands that we owe love to humanity. We owe love to the world we live in. When you read the Bible, it says in Genesis, the first chapters, the creation story, after God has created the earth, he was so pleased with it. So Sobukwe understood the pleasure that God felt and the love that he had for his creation, and therefore labored or endeavored to ensure that what was created with God, with love, is kept with love. That was his relationship with the material world or the material conditions. If I were to go to what you were saying, that our policies will flow from the logic of the African material conditions or the experiences of the African people. So his relationship with the material was to an extent that it was there to serve humanity. It was not there to be worshipped and to serve as a force of destruction, as the West had come to think of it. So that is one part that I think has to be appreciated about Sobukwe's spirituality. His love was not only for humankind, but was also generally for creation, and that you can also read in many of his poems, where he appreciates nature and the beauty of nature. You touched on a very, very important one, integrity. I think if we were to go back to his quote on leadership, where he says, leadership demands complete subjugation of self. And he goes on there to mention the qualities of a leader, which sums up, which can be summed up into integrity. He says uprightness of character, honesty, integrity. He mentions integrity there. And all these were his contributions on how a leader should be. So, as you pointed out, he was a leader with integrity. Mutuping called him the wonder boy of Africa. He says he was secret, incorruptible. You could not corrupt him. The system failed to corrupt him several times, and he that's why Mutuping gave him that qualitative character of a secret, incorruptible leader. And this is, particularly interesting that we are able to identify this quality on Sobukwe at a time when the country is faced with corruption of massive scale, left, right, and center. And interestingly, in the commission created, the Zondo Commission, only leaders of one particular organization, the ANC, have been fingered as having been corrupt. And we hope as we go on with the sessions of the commission, no leader of the true PAC of Sobukwe will be fingered, because members and leaders of the true PAC of Sobukwe live by his teachings and his thoughts and philosophies, and one of such is integrity. Let me take it only up to that point, Comrade Nkrumah, and hope to come back later.
You have started to contextualize the topic further, Sobukwe and spirituality, and also it being looked in relation to our contemporary times, what we are faced with in the country in terms of the many commissions that are being organized and which exposes the type and the quality of leadership that the African people are subjected to. And I think what you are beginning to share with us is that the crisis of this country in terms of what is exposed by these corruption commissions, because of all of them, they just are dealing with corruption that is taking place. It's a crisis of a leadership. It's a crisis of leadership. And a crisis of leadership, Mike, if we draw on what you said earlier on, it's alignment of principles. It's issues of integrity. Mafka Dumisani, you spoke about Sobukwe when he speaks about undying love of one's people. You are sharing with us that a true leader will completely subjugate himself to the will and the aspirations of the people. Integrity and uprightness of character. So basically, you are saying to us, Africa, that we are a country that has got a scarcity of a leadership that is able to emulate the qualities of Sobukwe. Maybe we can take this further in relation to the PAC National Unity Conference, which adopted the theme, let us be like Sobukwe. Let us be like Sobukwe. Unite, consolidate, advance, and defend Sobukwe's revolutionary legacy, right? So then we need to zoom it further into the current context. Mafrika Molebatsi, I'm going to at some point want you to throw in a word or two, right? Let us also appreciate, some of the comments made by Ntantla Ngidi, who says that Prof. Sobukwe, the defier of the undefiable, right? The defier of the undefiable. So we need to understand, for many to come to an extent of describing and defining Sobukwe as the defier of the undefiable. What does that mean today in terms of the type of leadership that is demanded by the African masses, by the African workers, to take not only the PAC forward, but to take the historic mission of the PAC forward? There is Davince Pele. Davince Pele says, I'm a member of EFF. I like to read about Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanist hero, hashtag Robert Sobukwe. And I ask myself why media of South Africa is scared to talk about hashtag Robert Sobukwe. Long live the legacy of Robert Sobukwe. Now, this is what we get as comments outside there. Africa, Tsietsi, are you ready to come on board on the topic, Robert Sobukwe and spirituality? And probably you'll assist us in terms of contextualizing it to the current leaders of the PAC. And also, how do we then further move forward in terms of spirituality and Sobukwe? Mafrika Molebatsi.
Isolate. Mafrika Nkrumah, I was off for some time. There was a technical glitch, but I'm back. So I caught it when Mafrika Dumisani Zwane was on. May I please just check whether Mafrika Dumisani Methula has had his chance to just have a bite at the introduction?
Mafrika Methula, he's still busy with the technological glitches.
Okay.
We don't have him on board, but yeah.
Okay. All right. No, thank you very much then. Let me just go back and say for quite a number of years, in terms of my reading of Sobukwe, I've always been bothered or disturbed that there's this element of spirituality which we have not even started to scratch the surface on. And I think when I look at some of the people within the PAC, historically, you'd have your ideologues who are almost clear Marxist-Leninists, Maoists, and who would then profess to be atheists. And I think even today, we still have people within the PAC who profess to be socialists and do not hit it out well with religion in the form of Christianity. Now, I sometimes ask myself questions as to if we believe that we would want to be like Sobukwe, we cannot then pick and choose as to which aspects of Sobukwe would we like to align ourselves with. It's either we love and adore Sobukwe for the completeness of the man, or we are not with him. So my purpose and intention with regard to saying, as I would have discussions with you, have a platform like this, and this is just the beginning. We would have loved to have had people like Dr. Mutsoko Peko, the Reverend Dr. Stanley Mohoba, and many other people. Now, my concern is that we need to advance into the Azanian and the Africanist revolution using Sobukwe as the epitome of our revolution, having a very clear understanding of the man in completion. I'm fascinated when Comrade Ngila Muendane says, in terms of the basics of humanity and the qualities of humanity, the one that starts it all is spirituality. And not spirituality only in terms of faith, but also in terms of consciousness. So the rarity of the combination of factors that Sobukwe possesses is the one that would guide us in terms of saying, what type of a man is this one that you would love to be like? And what type of a person or human being is Sobukwe, who we say, let us unite, consolidate, advance, and defend his legacy. So we are basically unpacking the personality and character attributes of Mangaliso Sobukwe. I do not want to have a perspective. I just want to open it up more, just to share with my comrades on the panel, to say these are the issues that have cost me sleepless nights, because I believe that personally Sobukwe belongs to the world, not only to Azania, not only to Africa, but his ideas, his ideals, his orientation and thinking definitely belongs to the world. Izwe lethu.
Africa. You are further complicating the matter. It goes back as we engage the matter, as we seek to unbundle the matter. It goes back to the statement that it is very difficult to introduce Robert Sobukwe to readers. It further says no one has done that adequately yet. So, Tsietsi, you are saying that this is one amongst many interaction we're going to have, with an intention that when we embrace Sobukwe, let it not be partly, let it be in totality, so that we understand, and not only the man, but his belief system in totality, that which kept him going, which kept him to attain what Ntantangidi refers as the defier of the undefiable. Mike, I'm going to come to you. And there's a part that also says that Sobukwe belonged to a generation of popular but lonely leaders of men and women, distinguished by their devotion, dedication, and determination. So these are lonely men and women who were concerned and committed to the cause of humans, of humanity, of the African people. In Paso, we used to speak about we seek to achieve total liberation of humanity from all forms of oppression, natural forms of oppression, and those that are not natural, those that are man-made. Now, Mike, we come back to you, Mtomdala. You see, when I say Mtomdala, I remember Wanda Masombo. That take us further in terms of Sobukwe and spirituality. Can you take us through in unbundling Sobukwe and spirituality? And also, how does it relate to us as leaders in the PAC today? So that there is that alignment. We don't speak and quote Sobukwe to be relevant, and for those that are on the podium to arouse the people, for the people to clap hands. But we quote Sobukwe so that we live and we emulate those particular qualities, so that we become better human beings, we become better leaders for our own generation and for the African people, so that we are able to fulfill this particular mission that was defined by the generation of Sobukwe. Mike?
Yeah, you have mentioned a very important concept there, Comrade Nkrumah. Emulate. We have got to emulate. But when you emulate spirituality, what do you emulate? What are the handles? What do you hold on to or identify as those elements or factors of spirituality? Now, those factors of spirituality, I have mentioned two of them already. I'll mention the others, and if there is still time, I will also elaborate on each one of them. These are love, integrity, compassion, commitment, purposefulness, sense of mission, resilience, fortitude, justice, learning, growth, humility, courage, candor or frankness, and consistency. Now, these are all spiritual elements. There's nothing material about them. There is nothing intellectual about them. There is nothing emotional about them. So they are all spiritual. And these, therefore, are signs of spirituality. When you adopt these and embrace them and align with them, they become your attributes, your character attributes. And Sobukwe had them all. Now, you also alluded to the present situation, what is happening today. What is happening today is a manifestation of what Sobukwe pronounced upon in 1959, when he said of a certain organization that they are no longer in the ranks of the liberation movement. I know even PAC people misunderstood this. What did it really mean? What it meant is that it rotated around the concept of love. Because a revolutionary is someone who is in the ranks of the liberation movement. Now, these did not have the revolutionary spirit with them. Why? Because they had no love for their people. Love for your people is what makes you a revolutionary, primarily. And the other things fit into that. And Sobukwe recognized it. So Sobukwe predicted these shenanigans that you see today, this corruption that you see today, this callousness that you see in leaders, this refusal to identify with the masses, this separation between the elite and the masses. They call other people masses. They forget that they are part of the masses. Because you can only say you love someone when you say, I am you and you are me. And you and me together with God are one. So if you are not one with the people, it simply means that there is no love between you and the people. And that simply means you cannot be in the ranks of the liberation movement. So that is the extent to which these no, they're not concepts, because if I call them concepts, they would have an intellectual dimension. But these are principles of value, universal values of life, and they don't belong to any age. They don't belong to any particular country. They are eternal. From the beginning of life, these principles governed life, and they'll continue to govern life. And this means that when you embrace them, then you are a true revolutionary. This is what Sobukwe stood for. This is what characterized him. So compassion is the same as love. Commitment means that you do not simply throw in something into the field. You do not simply come into the field with your hoe. You actually dig with your hoe and sweat. You are not the chicken that lays the egg onto your breakfast plate, onto the breakfast plate and leaves. You are actually the pig that forms part of the pork, or rather of the breakfast plate. That is commitment. You are the pig on the breakfast plate. It doesn't matter what happens to you. You are not ruled by emotion, and you cannot be bought, because you are focused on the goal that you have set for yourself, or which the revolution sets for you. And it also means resilience. While you are committed and fixed onto the goal, you are also resilient. And resilience does not mean flexibility. it means you can face any situation. And Sobukwe faced every situation, however it was, and committed himself to the goal of the revolution. And justice, as I said, is another, because he was just. He treated his captors fairly. He regarded them as human beings. He looked at them and said, "You are me, I am you." Who else does that? Was called towards his enemy. And learning. That is why in the PSC documents they say, if you don't read, you are committing a crime. It comes from that. You must learn and grow, and growth is part of that too. And humility mixed with courage. Sobukwe was humble, but his humility was not weakness, because he also had courage to face whatever he had to face. Face his colleagues in arguments, face his enemies also in contesting with them and showing them that he was determined, because they used to come onto Robben Island every year, these parliamentarians, to come and find out if he had changed his ideas. And when they spoke to him, he would come out of his house and stand outside. You know what these parliamentarians used to do? They used to take off their hats and put their heads behind their backs while they were talking to him. That's a kind of respect they gave him, because he deserved it. Because he showed them that, look, I am human, you are also human. And that is the identity, the ultimate identity of every human being. And he was frank with them. He had candor and told them, look, if you are still prepared or determined to keep my land, I am still determined to claim it back. So that is a kind of consistency that characterized Sobukwe, which was driven by courage, but said in humility. I mean, I'm just aghast. I cannot see how a single individual can combine these two apparently disparate dispositions, but Sobukwe could do that. Now, you ask a question to round up this earlier on as to what is the relationship between material and spiritual and spirit. There is no difference. They are just different forms, but everything begins with the spirit, with energy. Even in science, everything begins with energy and then becomes atoms and then molecules, and then it goes on to the material that we see in a brick. So everything, therefore, in human life begins with the spirit, because the spirit is the ultimate reality of existence, the ultimate attribute or dimension of a human being. So we cannot therefore separate the spirit from material or material from the spirit. They are a continuum rather than a dichotomy. We continue from spirit right up to material. Even the Bible says, in the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was turned into flesh. So there's no question here of saying I'm a materialist and this one's a spiritualist. We are everything. But as long as we recognize that the ultimate dimension that we possess is spirituality. Let me not take too much of the time, because talking about Sobukwe was bigger than life. We can't finish him in 1 hour. Let me give other people a chance to.
Sure.
African Nkrumah,
Sure.
can I just make a quick request for, if possible, more lighting on the side of Mafrika Dumisani and Mafrika Molebatsi?
Sure. Thanks about that, Tabel. Yes, Bramaik. Thanks, Bramaik, about that. Speaking about the continuum of spirituality in relation to materialism or matter, you remind me of one quote statement by Che Guevara. Che Guevara says that the revolution is made by men. or he says the revolution is made by man, but man must forge his revolutionary spirit from day to day. Close quote. So Africa, Tsietsi,
Yes, sure.
it's more like Che Guevara is in tandem and understood Sobukwe. When Che Guevara says that the revolution is made by man, but man must forge his revolutionary spirit from day to day. So we was in that particular quest, in that particular path of advancing the revolution, of making a revolution. And also Sobukwe had to forge his revolutionary spirit from day to day. Mafrika Dumisani, are you still with us, Force? We coming to you.
Yes, I am. I don't know
Yeah,
if the lighting has improved on my side or not. Mafrika Nkrumah. I think so far we've been able to scratch the surface insofar as Sobukwe's spirituality. I'm saying this is the surface because Mafrika Molebatsi raised certain points here when he said each time when he read the book by Benjamin Pogrand, How Can Men Die Better? He finds there were moments where Sobukwe would be conflicted, if I were to put it like that, on his Christian beliefs, and would be drawn away from Christianity and later would go back. And I believe that we should at a later stage be able to interrogate those moments. But allow me to start by trying to respond or comment on what Mafrican Ntlantla wrote here when he mentioned that most leaders of the liberation movement were educated by Christian schools, hence became Christians themselves. Yes, it is true. We learn in history that Nkrumah himself was at first a preacher. When he was in the US, he was at one point a preacher, and he later would pursue a path that had its foundations on faith. The revolutionary path that he pursued was at first founded on his faith, and his commitment and love for the African cause and African liberation was to a great extent buttressed on his faith, on his Christian faith, which taught him love. And that is one point that I wanted just to make. I do think that we have by now been able to share with everybody Sobukwe's spirituality, and we have been able to explain what we mean by spirituality. Mafrika Muendane has explained that in a nutshell, or in essence, it defines one's relationship with God and with one's surroundings. And Sobukwe had this deep relationship with God as the maker, and hence the love that he had for the African people. And this we also find in his letters, which he writes to his wife, and which I believe that this would then express or illustrate the true emotions or his true feelings. In one of his letters that he wrote on the 22nd of May in 1963, which he writes to his wife, I want just to take one line there. He says, "I thank God for a number of things, and one of them, an important one for our earthly lives, is that he gave me you for a wife." So deep was Sobukwe's appreciation and gratitude for God that he realized and he appreciated that he had the kind of a wife he had in Mama Sobukwe, it all by the grace and love and favor of God. This, again, as I indicated earlier on, defines his connection with God, his spirituality, his relationship, a deep relationship which he had with God. He repeats this in a letter which he writes to Mrs. Marquardt on the 2nd of July, 1963. He again demonstrates his relationship with God when he say, congrats, or no, I'm sorry, it's written to Mam Sobukwe on the 4th of July, 1963, I'm sorry. He says, congrats to the kids. I pray for you all daily as I have done for the past 3 years. In all the years of his incarceration, Sobukwe is saying he never lost faith. He kept on praying. So his faith, his spirituality was his force behind his determination, his resilience, and which, as I earlier on indicated, was even observed by his tormentors. Of course, when you go through his life and interactions with different people in prison, there comes a moment where he begins then to question Christianity. And I think this Benjamin Pogrand writes about it, but Sobukwe himself, in some of the letters, he does talk about this. And this was largely as a result of the conduct of some Christian pastors. There was a moment where the prison authorities refused a certain pastor who had earlier visited him and even given him communion, a holy communion, Pastor Kotze, Reverend Theo Kotze. He was then not further allowed, or he was then not allowed anymore to see Sobukwe, and instead he was replaced by Reverend Francis McCrath. This Reverend Francis McCrath is the one who pushed Sobukwe into questioning Christianity per se. He says, this Reverend Benjamin writes that Sobukwe, this Reverend saw Sobukwe as a sinner. So he was very, very judgmental. As opposed to Kotze, this new Reverend now was very judgmental. In other words, he was used as an instrument of battering Sobukwe's soul by the system, because the system realized that the only way they can break Sobukwe is to get into his soul, to batter his soul. So they then employed the services of this Reverend, who then began to see him as a sinner and a man who was deserving of the punishment that he was getting from the system. So you can see from this that it is the conduct of people who are said to be Christians who made Sobukwe to begin to question this particular religion. And he then later writes, and I like what Benjamin Pogrand writes when he explains that Sobukwe's break with Christianity was on the basis of its fundamentally doctrinal. In other words, he broke the moment when he had a break with Christianity. It was the doctrinal Christianity, not the spiritual Christianity. The spiritual Christianity is the one that is based on the biblical verse, John chapter 4, which says, God is spirit, and those who worship him in spirit and the truth. So that is your spiritual Christianity, not the doctrinal one, which you will find in your many churches, which assisted even the apartheid regime to oppress us. Those were doctrinal Christians, your Roman Catholic Church, with all due respect, your Anglican Church, and the many of these churches which were used by the apartheid regime in the country and in the continent to oppress African people. So we need therefore to draw a distinction between a doctrinal Christianity and a spiritual Christianity, which, as I've said, is based on the biblical verse which I've quoted. Let me pause for now.
Yeah, quite interesting perspective and angles. It reminds me, Africa Tsietsi, that we usually quote Article M, Africa Dumisani, Africa Muendane, of the PAC documents, which speaks about the historic mission of the PAC as a liberation movement. That the historic mission of the liberation movement is to attain complete freedom of Africa, or complete freedom for Africa, close quotes. Now we then expand, what does complete freedom entail? That complete freedom, it's political. Complete freedom also include economic. Complete freedom is militarily. Complete freedom also is social, and the social include the spiritual. And therefore, so Africa Dumisani, what you are pointing to us is that in the process of colonization of the African people, Christianity was used as an instrument of indoctrination of the African people, so that they break you spiritually. And when they break you spiritually, they are able to succeed in subjugating you as an African person. And when they succeed to achieve that, then Christianity as an instrument used to break you spiritually, it's used as an instrument to fulfill settler colonialism. It's used to fulfill imperialism. It's used to fulfill the state of servitude and pauperization of the African people, right? And you are helping us to deconstruct and the role of as Christianity to drive how it's linked to spirituality, to subjugate people, to have control of people, using one dimension, which is spirituality, and to arrest and to control people using spirituality. And I think it makes sense. It begins to make sense when Sobukwe says that Christianity, he says communism, like Christianity, they've been highly unfortunate in terms of representativity in Africa, or in our case. So it then means that those who stood and spoke for Christianity and also spoke for communism misrepresented this, and they used this as instrument of oppression and subjugation of the African people. So which then means that we've got a task, that we've got a construction before us, and ours is to deconstruct. So we need cadres, we need thinkers, we need the revolutionary intelligentsia who source and feed this liberation movement to deconstruct this particular system and to construct the new type of a social order. I think what also becomes interesting is the point by Henry Madibola. Henry Madibola says that Pixley Kaisaka Kaseme, way back in 1906, pronounced that, he quotes, the African is not a proletariat in the world of science and art, but is thoroughly spiritual and humanistic, close quotes. Henry further says that Mangaliso Sobukwe asserted that Africans are the fulcrum point of humanity and humanity for God. This is profound, and this marks the essence of Sobukwe, the man with a divine mission. PAC is a balanced and a unique party through the unity of opposites in combining the material interest of Africans with the spiritual interest. Thanks, Mafrika Madibolo, for your submission. Mafrika, we are 1 hour, 20 minutes. If ever there are questions and comments, you can start throwing them so that our panel can also start planning to respond to these questions. Now, Mafrika Luleka Slu Flatella says that Sobukwe was a deep spiritual person. Hear him when he deals with the question, what of Pan-Africanist Congress? He quotes Sobukwe. He says, we are here today to rededicate ourselves to the cause of Africa, to establish contact beyond the grave. So let's repeat this. We are here today to rededicate ourselves, our lives to the cause of Africa, to establish contact beyond the grave with the great African heroes and to assure them that their struggle was not in vain. We are met here, sons and daughters of Africa, beloved land, to drink from the fountain of African achievement, to remember the men and women who begot, to remind ourselves of where we are. Thanks, Mafrika Lulega, for the contribution.
Mafrika Nkrumah.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Before you go on, and while the other people are mulling over what kind of questions they want to ask, I want to make reference to what Mafrika Dumisani alluded to. What as to what the book says, the book written by Benjamin Pogrant says. Does it mean, therefore, that because Sobukwe was questioning religion or Christianity, was he also questioning spirituality? Nah. It begs that question. That allusion begs that question. I think it must be addressed, and I'm glad Mafrika Dumisani brought it up. Because Sobukwe differentiated between spirituality and religion. I remember Sobukwe actually said that long before religion came along, we were spiritual. That is very, very significant. Long before religion came along, we were spiritual. So by questioning Christianity, spirituality was not being questioned. What he was questioning was the conformist value system that the colonialists had brought in and tried to force us to comply with it. This distinction must be made very, very clearly, because there are many, many religions in this world. And the role of religion is to attempt to explain what spirituality is. In the same way that science as a discipline is attempting to explain what nature is and how nature operates. That's a very, very important distinction. People must not confuse religion and spirituality. Spirituality is supreme. Spirituality is eternal. And spirituality is based upon these principles like love. These principles or these universal values that define and regulate life. And these principles will continue regulating life. And all religions, therefore, will rotate around these principles. That is why you find these principles actually are integrated into all religions. It is because they are eternal and they were there before religion came along, and religion used them to try to make people reflect upon themselves and their role in life and what life really means to them and to the people around them. I think I was persuaded by that allusion to actually seek to use Sobukwe's thinking in differentiating between religion and spirituality. Yes, he was spiritual and he embraced religion as part of his spirituality. He was not religious and embraced spirituality as part of his religiosity. Thank you.
African Nkrumah, may I come in?
Africa Molebatsi, we can only see your forehead. Can you
Hey.
please move the camera away from yourself? Yes. Thank you.
Mafrika, thank you very much to what Mafrika Muendane has just said. I am in tandem with him with regard to that differentiation that spirituality is basic and religion is a manifestation of spirituality. What I would love to say, I don't want to make a speech, but just to keep throwing things, because we're not going to get this sorted in one sitting. We are in a process of trying to understand Sobukwe in his completeness. When he says we want to call our souls our own. Now, at one stage, one of the comrades, I think it could have been Dumisani Zwane, who alluded to Che Guevara. Now, one of the revolutionaries that really touches my heart is Che, when he said that any person that calls themselves a revolutionary and is worth the salt of being called that must have love for humanity. So when Sobukwe says Africa for Africans, Africans for humanity, and humanity for God, my understanding is that you say Sobukwe is spiritual in terms of his being affectionate, his passion for love of humanity, his humility. So the attributes, numerous as they are, that Comrade Ngila alluded to, really encapsulate the essence of spirituality. So as we go on with the discussion, I think certain things will fall into place. At this moment, we're still stating a thesis. We're still just breaking things down, and at a certain stage, the synthesis will follow. And I appreciate the fact that we are open and we just cracking this thing in such a way that it gets explosive. Whatever goes up will come down. So I think for today, I'm quite gratified with what we have done. We are not going to facilitate or precipitate the day to reach a conclusion. We're not going to do that with Sobukwe. It will be a sheer sacrilege. However, I think my concluding words would be just that that which had bothered me for over 30 years is being attended to with regard to making ourselves as Pan-Africanists appreciate this man that we call the hero. The words that were quoted by Comrade Slew were said when he opened the Heroes' Day on that year, in that day. And whenever he says, he speaks of people across and over the grave, then you can actually see how spiritual this man is. And the 5 elements of consciousness with regard to knowledge, emotion, self-consciousness, will, and determination become very clear when Sobukwe speaks in terms of really seeing that man is a spiritual and a social animal. Isolate.
Africa. Do we still have comments or questions? Tapela?
Yeah, Comrade Nkrumah, may I
Yes.
just chip in to just comment on the point that was made by Mafrika Ngila on the separation of religion and spirituality.
Please do.
And also that Sobukwe understood the difference in the two. And I just want to concur with that. And I wish to illustrate this by reading from a letter which he wrote on the 19th of May, 1969 to Benji, his friend, Benjamin. He says in the letter, "It is Christianity per se, as I have told you before now, that I cannot accept. And I don't think I will ever accept it, even if I attend services regularly." So here he's talking about religion. But down in the same letter, he says, "Quite a few people have already tried to make me feel welcome, and I am grateful. I am quite certain things will work out well. God has been good to me, Benji." You see here, he differentiates a Christianity that was represented by the persons that I've quoted. In this particular instance, there was an attitude from a Methodist, the Methodist clergy, which was unwilling to visit him. That was when he was released. He was now in Kimberley, but they had not visited him. So he looked at them as people who were representing a form of a religion which he was now beginning to reject. However, his spirituality, his spiritual connection and spiritual relationship with God remains unchanged. That's why he says, "God has been good to me, Benji." So there is the difference. That's why I said spirituality means relationship with God, your relationship in essence with God and with your surrounding, which includes his creation and his people.
Are you saying that on the basis of that letter, it can be concluded that Sobukwe rejected Christianity? However, he maintained and continued with his spiritual journey.
Let me repeat what I said earlier on. What he rejected was doctrinal Christianity.
Christianity, right?
Doctrinal Christianity, which was represented by these churches or these claims that I've mentioned. He did not reject spiritual Christianity because, as I said earlier on, spiritual Christianity is based on the scripture that I've quoted, John chapter 4, verse 24. God is spirit. Those who worship him, worship him in spirit and in truth. And Sobukwe illustrated that throughout his writings and his relationship with people. His spiritual aspect and the truth aspect would come out from time to time. And the Bible also teaches us that Christ was conceived spiritually. So the spiritual Christ is spirit. It's not the one that Sobukwe rejected. He rejected the doctrinal one. I thought I should make that part very, very, very clear because it is what is written also in many writings about him. I think maybe to get to the climax of our discussion, why did we want to interrogate Sobukwe's spirituality? Because we were not doing it in vain. The purpose was to illustrate the role that his spirituality played in making him the person that he was, and the role that his spirituality played in fortifying his beliefs in the cause, his steadfastness, his uncompromising character, his courage, his fearlessness, and his ability to inspire many to continue to fight against the oppressive system. That is why we were interrogating this topic, to appreciate the cardinal role that spirituality would play in making a people fight against a system of oppression. And we have illustrated that it is this very spirituality that you know, enabled him to resist many attempts by the system to break him, to break his soul, to corrupt him, to lure him into or to co-opt him into a system of corruption. It is this spirituality that gave him those, and it is what he bequeathed to us as a legacy. That it is only by maintaining this relationship with God, the relationship of love. So Sobukwe says, when he concludes about the characteristics of a leader, he says a leader must have consuming love for one's people. And not just love, but consuming love. A leader must be consumed by the love for his people and the love for the cause for which they stand. Now, such a leader would dare not put their hands in the cookie jar and steal from the resources or the funds, the public funds, in order to enrich themselves and their cronies, leading to situations where you would have children dying in pit toilets in the Eastern Cape and other rural provinces, where there are still pit toilets. A child drowning in feces because leaders have stolen the money that was supposed to be used to build the toilets. Do you understand? You would not have a situation where people would die in life esidimeni because the leaders, the corrupt leaders, have put their hands in the public funds and denied them the services that they needed. So Sobukwe's spirituality built that wall, that fence, that that castle around him, not to be vulnerable to such corrupt tendencies. And we, as his followers, must also, receive his spirit, or we must, carry on the legacy and what he bequeathed us as values, and define us differently from the folk that I've defined so far, where you have people dying in hospitals because they cannot even afford a simple meal. People dying of starvation in a public hospital because there are no meals. You see, the kind of leaders who are not motivated by the kind of spirituality Sobukwe had.
Sure. So
Isn't it amazing?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I wanted to say to you and Dumisani, particularly the key comments made by yourself and Mafrika Dumisani, that it then means that the leadership that must be elected by PIC members, whether at branch level, regional level, provincial level, national level, these should be the leaders who have these qualities that we learn from Sobukwe. They must live these particular qualities, right? Because of these are the leaders that we are saying that as PAC, these are the leaders we are saying as PAC should lead the African people. We are giving this national leadership to say that these are the people who must serve. These are the people who've got the qualities, who emulate the leadership qualities of Sobukwe. And these are the people who would take out the African people from this yoke of servitude, of subjugation, and the underdevelopment that the African people are facing. Now, Mafrika Dumisani, having said that, there is also a part in the Bible. You know, I'm not a scholar of the Bible. It says that it's Acts 6, verse 3. It says that, therefore, brethren, select from among you 7 men of good reputation, Brahmaik. It further says, full of spirit, of wisdom, whom we may put in charge of this task. Right? Let me read it again. And
I remember it very well.
Yes. Therefore,
I remember it very well.
Therefore, brethren, select from among you 7 men of good reputation, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we may put in charge of this task. I'm going to request you to. I think we are
Yeah,
towards
can
the
I just
peak
make
of.
can I just make a quick comment on the verse you've quoted?
Yes.
Two of the men who were selected there of the 7, it was Stephan and Philip. Ne? And now I want you to understand the importance of spirituality and being consumed with spirituality, or being full of the Spirit. When Stephan was stoned, was about to be stoned to death, the Bible says he looked up. He did not fear what was happening. He stood for the truth. He was being, he was being accused wrongfully. He spoke the truth about what Moses did, and then when he was about to be killed, the Bible says he was filled with Holy Spirit. He looked up and he saw God, or he saw Jesus standing on the side of God. And the second one is Philip. Philip was sent by the Holy Spirit to go and explain biblical verses to one African man who was a finance minister to the Queen of Ethiopia. The importance of the Spirit there is that, one, it gave Philip courage, it gave Stephan courage, and secondly, it gave Philip wisdom to be able to unravel the mystery in the scripture that that finance minister was reading. So the importance of the Spirit is there, Comrade Nkrumah. So if our leaders are filled with Spirit, they will have courage and they will have the wisdom to do the impossible.
And a correct spirit for that matter. Eh?
Yes.
Yeah, and the correct spirit is governed by the pillars of spirituality. And the pillars of spirituality are the principles that govern and regulate life. And some of these principles I've humbly been able to spell out here. There are many, but these are primary. And anybody, I'm talking to the young people now, because the young people are the future. And the future needs leaders. And the leaders that must lead the PAC and the nation of Africa tomorrow must be such leaders as emulate Sobukwe. Don't just say we must emulate Sobukwe without knowing what it is that we must do to emulate him. It's very easy to do. It's very easy to express love. It's very easy to conduct integrity, because all you have to do with integrity is that what you are thinking and what you are saying and what you are doing must be integrated into one. That's where the word integrity comes from. Integrated, what you call attributes of speech, thought, and action. So this is the way to go, therefore, in emulating Sobukwe. And you don't have to wave a magic wand. All you need to do is simply to look at Sobukwe. What are his attributes? And his attributes are those that are aligned to the principles of life, of life. And in that way, we'll go places. I mean, Africa Dumisani has said it. The lack of compassion at Esitimeni, the lack of consideration of the people when you are using their money, the callousness with which you treat your people, the loveless relationship that exists between you and the people, the promises you make, which means commitments that you make, are broken every day. And Sobukwe was committed. And commitment means that you actually fulfill the promises and the commitments that you make. And in this country today, no such thing happens. People make promises every day, and they lie, and they call that truth. And I'm very, very glad that we have had this discussion, and I'm sure that those people who have been watching and listening to this will take note of the comments that have been made by the members of the panel here. And we cannot be like Sobukwe 100% overnight, but we must work at it. And if we don't work at it, then we're not going to be the kind of leaders that Sobukwe was. But let me mention one thing here. All these principles that I've mentioned here are related to sacrifice. You sacrifice when you have got love. You have got compassion. You sacrifice to have compassion because you are trying to be like the sufferer, which means that there's something in you that you sacrifice. We must sacrifice everything, airtime, our time. There are people who have died. People who have died and hanged. People who have died in the battlefield. They gave their lives. The question that I'm asking people here is, what are you giving? You don't have to give your life anymore. You only have to give your time. I was commenting just yesterday when people were called upon to go to Sobukwe's event tomorrow. And the chairman of that branch was calling upon people to respond, and nobody was responding. Only one person responded. Now, this is the kind of behavior that must be discouraged. We must be able to sacrifice our time and attend events. And without attending events, we are missing out on the actions that are needed to prosecute this struggle. And we shall never, ever reach our destination or our destiny if we continue behaving like this, if we don't sacrifice. People are even afraid to sacrifice time. I'm becoming practical here. It's all very well to talk about these things in the air, then talk about spirituality, integrity, and stuff like that without going into the practicalities. What do we mean by commitment? It is those small little things that we've got to do to proceed. And Africa Dumisani mentioned a word here, which we always talk about. He said that a good leader is the one that is able to inspire the masses. What does inspire mean? Look at the spelling of the word inspire. It has got spirit in it, and that word is spiritual. So you cannot inspire people without being spiritual. And here are the handles of spirituality, these attributes that we've got to emulate from Sobukwe. So let us not just use words loosely. And the reason why we have this, I think, why Comrade Molebatsi mounted this discussion, I think the reason is to inspire in people as a leader that they must stand up and go. They must stand up and do work. Never a day must pass in your life without you having done anything towards the struggle. Even writing a word or calling the radio station and talking about the PAC or talking about Africanism, Pan-Africanism, talking about the masses and the aspirations of the masses. Do something every day. So when you sleep and you ask yourself, what did I do today? I think this, Comrade Molebatsi, you'll agree, is the purpose for which you mounted this discussion. Sure.
Thanks about those very powerful and persuasive words, Bramike. We have gone our 90 minutes as planned. I'm going to request you just to prepare yourself in terms of quick closing remarks. I'm not sure, so Mafrika Tapelo, if there are any comments that we can go through. Whilst waiting for comments and also Mike and Dumisani to prepare their closing remarks. Mafrika Dumisani, let me surprise you again. Exodus 18 verse 21 says that furthermore, we shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain, and we shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. So basically, Mike and Mafrika Dumisani, speaking about the leadership qualities that we must emulate Sobukwe. We must not speak about let us be like Sobukwe. It's a very nice a theme with nice sound bites, and for us to be relevant, but we must emulate Sobukwe in practical terms. Whether you are in the national leadership of the PAC, in the provincial leadership, regional leadership, branch leadership, or you're a PAC member, we must emulate Sobukwe's qualities. We must leave them in practical terms. And I think what becomes most relevant also in terms of what Brother Mike has advanced is that we must be seen executing the duties and the tasks that are required to take this revolution forward on daily basis. We should not speak about these things, but we must be practical and put them into concrete action. We usually say that in the PAC we don't have branchless members. So each and every PAC member belongs to a branch. You've got duties as a PAC member. In actual fact, when you read the oath of allegiance of the PAC, at the end of it, it says that I accept the leadership of the PAC. So all PAC members are entrusted with a leadership role and responsibility. And we are driven and guided by these particular qualities that are emulated, that we must emulate from Sobukwe. So the discussion goes on, the interrogation goes on, for us to have a deeper and a clearer understanding of Sobukwe. And we do that, and not for an academic exercise. We do that not only to become smarter and clever, but we do that to fulfill the historic mission of the PAC. PAC must take over, it must seize political power in this country. And for us to do that, it means that the quality of leadership, the quality of leaders that we demonstrate and we put out there should be that of Sobukwe's caliber and of his generation. So this is not just a romantic exercise for us to be seen, but it's for us to remind ourselves, it's for us to learn, it's for us to grow, so that we fulfill the historic mission and the historic task as articulated in the Article M of the PAC Basic Document as adopted in 1959. Mafrika Tapelo, if there are no other comments from our participants, then we can, Mafrika Tapelo, are there any comments?
Yes, I'm just going to put them on the screen so that you can see them straight away. I think the first one.
Thanks, yeah. Mafrika Zandiswa says, Kula says, our spirituality must be linked to our need to liberate ourselves. And Sobukwe gives us an example of that. Spirituality to us must be beyond the doors of the church in its Western form. Since we are aware of it, it is used to continue. Today, to lull, it is used to continue. Today, to lull African people from discovering their purpose in fighting for the ownership of their souls. This conversation today must form the base of who we understand Sobukwe was striving his revolutionary call as he was making sense and drawing from his spirit or spirituality. That's a submission from Africa Zandiswa. There was one from Tlantla also. I think it is an interesting one. Mafrika Kopane Wampapata. African Tlantla says that how would you compare Steve Biko's utterances with regard to religion and spirituality to those from Mangaliso Sobukwe? At some stage, Steve Biko too speaks of black God that must raise his voice and make himself heard over and above the noises from his counterpart, white God. Africa and Tlantla, this is part of a conversation and interrogation that has to continue, where now we move from understanding Sobukwe and spirituality, we move on to Sobukwe, Bigo, and spirituality to further expand the Azanian school of thought in redefining the African revolution moving forward. Kabani Wampapata, former Paso Vista Soweto, he says that thank you to the panel for the insightful discussion about one of the best sons of the African soil. The missing piece, which Sobukwe is, in the mainstream discussion about the liberation struggle in Azania, is actually the masterpiece, is Zweletu. Africa would go through all the comments. The last one is we should be very careful when we talk about spirituality. Onyanisile, xa uthi kuqala spirituality kuze inkolo, but spirituality sine context. As Pan-Africanists, we should follow African spirituality. That is Sikela Ta Skelika Njobe. Muhsin Hassan says that within the PAC, we had able leaders from other religions, Comrade Kwara Ibrahim and Pane Desai, to name a few. Thanks for those particular submissions and comments, Mafrica. Let the debate, let the interrogation, let the discussion continue. This particular initiative from Gauteng Provincial Executive Committee, led by the Provincial Chairperson of Africa, Tsietsi, seeks to spark a debate and a discussion to sharpen ourselves and to sharpen also our instruments so that we arm ourselves and we are able to carry forward our revolutionary task. Mafrica, Muendane, few seconds in terms of your closing remarks. Bramike?
We just lost him there. Maybe Mafrica Dumisani can start.
Mafrica Dumisani?
Yeah, thanks, Noble Sons, and thanks for the comments. The comment about Black God, I think earlier on when I did my introduction, I read a part where Sobukwe spoke about the God of Africa. And it has to be understood that the God of Africa is the God of liberation, as opposed to the European God, who was the God of dispossession and oppression. And equally, I believe that Black God, according to Bigo, is the God of liberation. And that is the God that Sobukwe speaks about and believed in. And indeed, again, the Sobukwe spoke about the importance of appreciating other religious groups. In his letter of the 16th of October 1968, he writes that he says, I should like to see an inter-religion movement designed to bring together worshippers of God, be they Jews, Christians, or Muslims. This, I think, covers the part where the comrade who made a comment earlier on mentioned other religions and even mentions the late Gora Ibrahim. Comrade Nkrumah and comrades in the Gauteng province, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Comrade Tsietsi, we thank God for speaking to you and prompting you to initiate this discussion as a province. And again, it is important that we emphasize what even one of the comrades here, Comrade Zandi, is pointing out, that when we talk spirituality, it is not just a talk in vain. It is spirituality as the oil of the revolutionary machine. The machine that must pursue the revolution, persecute it to the ultimate end. It is spirituality that will make us not to forget that we are still a dispossessed people. And there will never be a point where our spirit will be rested unless we persecute our struggle for the repossession of our dispossessed land with vigor, with courage, with fearlessness, and with love for the African people. I believe there will be opportunities for us to take this discussion further and to use it to reorganize the PAC as the vanguard party of the African people to complete our revolution and restore its dignity of the African people, so that God will be proud of them as His proud creation, as people with dignity, whose dignity has been restored, and to protect the land which God has created, which, as I quoted in the Bible, that after He created the earth, He was pleased with it. Our mission in repossessing our land, it is part of fulfilling God's mission of remaining pleased with His land. Our land has been raped in all forms. It has been polluted in all forms. So our struggle is to protect it and to restore it to the form that is pleasing to God. Izolate.
Thanks, Mafrika Dumisani. Mike?
Yeah, Comrade Nkrumah, yes, I was cut off, sorry. Maybe I cut myself off. It is my proud, thick farm workers' fingers. You know, they do all sorts of things. What I really want to say to actually to add my weight to what Comrade Dumisani has said is that without consistency, without sacrifice, nothing can be achieved. And the true sacrifice is a sacrifice that is done consistently. So consistency is one of the principles that Sobukwe embraced. And only a person with a high spiritual value or high spiritual consciousness can be consistent, because that kind of person is never moved by the changing winds and the changing breezes. So we must be consistent in our sacrifice. And let me conclude by quoting Dr. King, Martin Luther King, who said, if you cannot sacrifice for what you desire, then you do not deserve that which you desire. If you cannot sacrifice for what you desire to achieve or obtain, then you do not deserve that desire. What do we desire? We desire a united PAC. We desire a true vanguard of the masses of the people. We desire, as Nkrumah has just said, to seize political power in this country. And only in that way can we achieve economic power and the dignity that we deserve, the kind of dignity that African people have lived with for centuries and centuries before colonialism came in. So I end up with the word sacrifice. Thank you. Izolate.
Africa.
Yeah,
Thanks, Mafrika, for having prepared for this particular session, and also for making the sacrifice to be part of this particular thought-provoking session. Mafrika Molebatsi, we are also grateful for having constructed the topic for this particular session as we observe Sobukwe month. On Saturday, tomorrow, in Gauteng, we are having 2 branches, which will be having the AGM, and 1 branch will be launched. That is Zola branch. It's a branch that has been revived. It will be launched tomorrow on Saturday. And also Saturday, the Gerald Nkonto branch will be having its AGM. And on Sunday, we will gather at the Sobukwe's house in Mufolo, where we'll convene there at 11 o'clock as PAC members in Gauteng province. And we'll then have from Sobukwe's house in Mufolo, we'll then march and have a procession to next to the regional office in Mufolo also to have our program there. We'll converge at 11 o'clock. So the party political work in Africa still continues under the hard conditions of that we face of lockdown. The party political work continues. Let me also close with this particular quotation of Sobukwe, where he says, I quote, "The wheel of progress revolves relentlessly, and all the nations of the world take their turn at the field glass of human destiny. Africa will not retreat. Africa will not compromise. Africa will not relent. Africa will not equivocate, and she will be heard. Remember Africa." Close quote. Is late. Thanks,
Yeah, free.
Africa. And may we continue with the revolutionary work of the PAC. May we continue to intensify the positive action campaign for the seizure of state political power. Is late. No compromise.
No surrender.
Thanks, Mafrica. Thanks, Mafrica Tapel. I think we are done.
Siasa kuwe Azania. Siasa kuwe Azania. Siasa kuwe Azania. Siasa kuwe Azania. Siasa kuwe Azania.